everyone, and welcome back to those of you who have been here over the last 2 weeks, and welcome to anyone who's new today. Thanks for the introduction, Lisa. So we've done this series of webinars over the last few weeks, and today I can't believe we're at the third one already. The time has flown. So today we're going to be talking about stress, which is, I think, a theme that relates to all of us to some degree at different stages and phases in our day-to-day. Just to recap, I guess, for those of you who are new today, it's really around, as Lisa said as well, giving tips and techniques. And for those of you who've been here already, you will know I'm all about uncomplicating and simplifying, especially in these quite complicated times that we're living. So it's really around, in many ways, reminding you of things that might be useful for you to do. And if anything, then it's around energizing how we can make the shift of knowing what would be good for us to do and what could help us in terms of positive change to actually doing something with them. So you'll see throughout this session, I'll be prompting for you to think about things and to identify things that you could do, small but maybe significant, to support yourselves. So, sorry, bear with me. So today, as we said, we're going to be talking about stress and stress management. So what I would like to do today is break it into two sections. So the first part, what I would like is to talk about managing your stressors so that you can look at either eliminating or reducing them. So it's about spending a bit of time thinking about what's on your plate, what's going on, what's stressing you, and what is it that you can do about to help you lighten the load. And then the second part that I'd like to look at is around how can we manage ourselves differently so that we respond to the stresses differently. So that's acknowledging the piece of we have stress in our lives. That's part of life, I guess. But if we could do things for ourselves and with ourselves, how can we ideally move from reacting to responding and responding in a more effective manner? So the first piece I'll dive straight in is managing the stressors part. And this is where we just get very practical and very technical on it. So what I encourage here is that after the session at some time that works for you is to get a pen and paper and to sit down and just take a few moments and say, what is stressing me? And I'm sure all of you have some knowledge and understanding in terms of what your stressors are. But again, like what I referred to before in previous sessions, quite often we can be so busy on the treadmill of life that we're reacting to life so much and things are coming at us that we're just doing, that taking that time out for a couple of minutes and saying, okay, I'm just going to regroup, reassess where I'm at, what's going on, what's bothering me, what's on my mind, what's stressing me, can be in itself a very effective tool. And if anything, what it will do is take all of what's going on in here and put it somewhere. So that kind of cluttered feeling we might have of multiple things coming at us, we can just script on a sheet of paper. So very practically to start with that. And then from there, it's to look through your list and say, okay, of these things, are there any things that I think I could actually eliminate or reduce? So this is where we're looking at really, I guess, troubleshooting and looking at the list and saying, are there things on my load that are stressing me that maybe don't need to be there? And is there something I can do about them? And then we're going to move into, when you've identified those things, we're going to look at it. And then I want to look at the things that you can't eliminate and you can't reduce, but how can we respond to them differently? So on the eliminating and the reducing piece, this is really around looking at how can you lighten your load. So I want to refer back to week 1, where I was talking about planning, prioritizing, being able to say no and things like that. So on your list, look at the things. Are there things here that if you were to plan differently or to prioritize differently, or maybe to say to someone when it's coming at you, say, no, I can't do this or I can't do that now. And if you were to rejig things a little bit, could you, in essence, either take something off your plate that's stressing you or at least reduce it so that it's having less of an impact on you? We have multiple stressors in our life, I think. So it's looking at them personally, professionally, socially, COVID related. We might have financial stresses. People are stressing maybe about their job, if they've had job loss, finding a new job, multiple. So again, I'm really aware that we're all touched by stressors very differently and maybe very similarly as well, but it's making it very individual and personalized to yourself and really thinking about that. And on top of that is also looking at what else can I do? So how I'm approaching and dealing with the stresses that are coming my way. Is there anything I can do differently? So maybe the way I'm approaching it isn't working in my favor. So it's really looking around what's another dimension, or what's another perspective that I can take in this. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about perspectives later on. So when you've identified that and said, okay, so I'll give an example actually. So say, for example, someone is stressing because they have a big presentation coming up or an interview coming up, and they feel there's so much coming at me, I don't have time to focus on it. So I'm stressing about the fact that I have to do it and it matters and is important to me, but I'm also stressing because I don't have the time to kind of dedicate to it. So that's where we have to get really, I guess, focused and say, do I need to prioritize? This is more important right now. This is taking headspace. This is bothering me because I'm not able to focus on it. So is there something else that's coming my way today or this week that I can say, I need to move that. I need to reprioritize and give myself the time that I need to pay attention to something that's more relevant for me right now. So it does take discipline, it does take focus, and it does take commitment. But this is, I guess, what I would consider an empowering part around it, because we're taking control and we're managing things. So we're sitting down and saying, what can I do about what's going on here? And to take some of that power back for ourselves. Um, Another thing related to that is that you might feel when you've got your list is, okay, this is a bit overwhelming. Where do I start now? Because now I need to start rejigging things, shuffling things, maybe making a phone call to say to someone, I can't do this now, or whatever it might be. So again, similar to what I've said in previous weeks, is break it down, start somewhere, start small, and start with one thing. So if you have a number of actions that come out of this exercise, just pick one and say, right now, that's what I'm going to focus on, and then notice the positive impact that that will have in terms of what you've done and the outcome and the experience of it. And then go to your next one, go to your next one, and go to your next one. But it's really about breaking things down to reduce the overwhelm as part of this. So, an ending statement on this one, which I think resonates nicely, is you can do anything, but not everything. And this is really around giving ourselves permission that we don't have to be Wonder Woman or Superman or whoever it is and try to get everything done all the time. It is okay not to do everything, but start with something. And from there, move to your next point and to your next point and to your next point. So we've looked at the very practical side in terms of how to reduce or eliminate some of the stressors that are in our life. And the next part is looking at the ones that are still there. It's part of life. They need to be dealt with. And I'm understanding as well that we'll have peaks and troughs in our life. We'll have some periods that are more stressful than other periods. So hopefully this will cover across that for everybody. And this is really around how to accept and acknowledge the stresses that we might have, but how can we respond differently? So I've identified 3 topics here that I'd like to look at under this theme, which is looking at self-care, looking at feelings and emotions, and then the third one is looking at matters of the mind. And that hopefully by tweaking a few things in these 3 different areas, that our response to stress, our response to what's coming at us day to day, will be positively influenced. So I like this statement as well, which sets the tone for this, which is, it's not the load that breaks you down, it's the way that you carry it. And that's really where I'm coming at from in this section, which is the acknowledgement that there are stresses, but maybe how we're carrying it, how we're seeing it, how we're looking at it, or how we're approaching it is actually what's influencing the stresses in themselves. So it's about being creative in terms of that and what we can do differently to have a different reaction or response to what's coming at us. So the first of the 3 points that I'd like to talk about is the self-care bit. And this is a reminder. Again, I covered this in the first webinar, which is around putting our own oxygen mask on first. And it's really looking at what are my needs that maybe I'm neglecting that could do with a little bit of attention or nurturing. And if I were to put a bit more time into looking after me, then by default, I'm going to be able to respond to what's coming at me on a day-to-day basis in a more effective manner. So, for example, someone might feel, and this is a theme I think that has come up a lot for people during lockdown, which is people not having enough time for themselves because they're overloaded with maybe a house full of children and partners and maybe looking after a parent as well, and feeling I need 5 minutes for myself. And in the absence of that 5 minutes, we might fly off the handle quicker on something that comes our way than we would have normally. So it's really saying to myself or to ourselves, I need that time. I need that time for me, but also so that that will spill into the rest of my life and I'll be able to deal with things. So again, if for those of you who were on this call 2 weeks ago, is to remind you of that. Anyone new today is to think about that and say, what are some of my basic needs that maybe could do with a little bit of attention? And if I were to look at those, the knock on and ripple effect to that is that I will be responding more effectively to the stresses that are in my day to day. And I'm also going to add a couple of what I would consider the reliable basics. So all of this, I have no doubt you know, but if anything, it's to work as a reminder, because we can underestimate them. So just to bear with me on these as I run through them, but I think will help in our response to stress. So the first one is around hydration. Dehydration is associated with low levels of energy. It affects our mood. Apologies for that. My screen has just, I'm really sorry about this. My screen has just gone black. Lisa, can you hear me? Sorry, Lisa. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, Derv, yes.
Yeah, I really apologize. My screen just went black. I'm not sure what's happening. So apologies for that, everybody. Um, so dehydration. So even a small thing like taking a sip of water is going to help our mood. It's going to help our clarity of thought. So sipping water isn't going to remove the stress maybe in our day, but what it will do is help our mood in reaction to it. And the same goes with food. So I'm not here to preach or to talk about what you should eat or what you shouldn't eat in any shape or form, but it's really, again, just a reminder to say when we're looking after some of these basic things in our day to day, we're going to benefit positively from them. And the same is with regards to moving our body. And by doing exercise, it's releasing endorphins, so we're feeling better. If we're feeling better, we're responding to stress in our day to day more effectively as well. And similarly to sleep. And I do acknowledge that all of these themes are themes on their own, and we could talk at length about them. And specifically with sleep, I do understand that many people have challenges with sleep, but it's looking at, are there things that you could do more of or less of that would help get a better sleep? And I'm sure all of you can relate to what it feels like to have had one even bad night's sleep and the impact that that can have on the next day. And even imagining a normal day, not particularly demanding or stressful, but the impact on our mood and our reactions to the day when we have that sleep deprivation. So if you add on top of that a stressful period or a stressful day, that's going to have a bigger impact again. And then a final one on that is around mindfulness and meditation. And again, I acknowledge that this isn't for everyone and each to their own. And I do also acknowledge that there was an association maybe before around meditation being, somebody under a tree, very zen and having to dedicate many hours to practice it. But this is becoming more and more every day now. Organizations are building it into their teams. Senior managers are having mindfulness coaches. There are jobs in organizations now where people are focusing on that, and that's the role about bringing mindfulness and meditation to employees. Studies are done. There's science backing it up that when we're doing this, when we're practicing mindfulness and meditation, it is doing something in our brain which is helping us deal with stress in our day. So not only are we feeling good when we're practicing it, even if it's for 5 minutes, 5 minutes of it is better than no minutes. Not only is it helping in that moment to help center us and calm us, what it's helping us do is building up almost a deposit in our system so that when we are having a stressful period, that is in our system to help us respond more effectively in that time. So again, as I said, these are just more reminders to build in terms of your self-care to support and to help in our response to daily stresses. So the second of the three that I'd like to talk about here is around feelings and emotions. And the reason I bring this one up is that this is something that comes up in my work quite a lot as well, which is around when we're dealing with life and dealing with the demands, dealing with the stresses that come, the worries that come, and particularly again over this last year, I think many of us really look to act as if we're okay and that we've got it all together. And we nearly put on this actor facade that we feel we need to do. Because if we acknowledge or share our stresses, that we feel that there's something maybe wrong about that. And that often by acting as if everything's okay and acting as if we've got everything together in itself is firstly tiring. And it's an additional load that we're carrying on top of the load we're already dealing with. And by ignoring or avoiding those feelings that we're feeling of maybe overwhelm, of stress, of I don't know how to cope, I don't know how to handle, I don't know where to start, all of these very understandable and normal reactions that we will have at different stages in our life, that it catches up in us. So if we're looking to kind of box it off and push it down and suppress, it'll come back. it'll come and come in front of us at some point. So what I really strongly encourage here is around whatever you're feeling, feel it, sit with it, breathe, allow it be. It is okay. And sometimes by just giving us that permission to say, this is tough, this is hard, I'm struggling, or whatever it might be, in itself will lighten that load, because we're allowing ourselves to be human and to have a normal human reaction. And then on top of that is, if we could even share that with someone, which I talked about last week, is that shared experience that we're not on our own, and that can really help. So if anything, it's just really to acknowledge that and encourage that it is okay. It is not a sign of weakness, which many people I think do think, to be having a hard time or to be feeling overwhelmed. And actually it's a strength to be able to acknowledge it, sit with it, and talk about it. And then just a quote to end on this section is around, sometimes asking for help is the bravest move. You can make, sorry, the bravest move you can make. You can't go it alone. We're not supposed to. We're not lone rangers. It is okay to be able to share and to collaborate and to bounce things off people. So hopefully that sort of resonates to some degree with some of you today. And then my final piece is around the matters of the mind. And really where I'm coming from with this is around looking at how we are thinking and what we are thinking with regards to dealing with stress, with regards to dealing with the stressors in our life, and how we're approaching it, how we're thinking about it. So there are research and studies done that show that we have on average about 60,000 thoughts in a day, which is quite significant. And also that approximately 80% of those are negative. So that's, to me, that's quite impactful as a statement. And if you imagine the majority of those thoughts are subconscious, they're running in the back, like this internal voice that I'm referring to here on the third point, that's 24/7, chatter, chatter, and we're having this internal dialogue with ourselves. And it would be interesting to know, how does your internal dialogue sound? What is your internal voice? And this is something I work a lot on with people and myself, and it's a personal development tool I very much dedicate in my life, and I have found very useful, which is thinking about, how am I talking to myself, and how am I approaching and thinking about what's going on in my life, and how I'm thinking and what I'm thinking, how is that supporting or exasperating dealing with the stresses in my life. So one way to get a gauge in terms of how your internal voice might be is asking yourself, would I talk to a friend the way I talk to myself? Or would I let a friend talk to me the way I talk to myself? And if your answer to either of those questions is not so much, I don't think I'd be hanging out with someone who's talking to me that way, that could be a good indicator that there might be a bit of room here to look at that and see, how could there be a bit of a shift. So there's, again, a lot of work and research and studies around this area in terms of the power of the thought and the impact that has. So here on a very practical level is looking at, what can you do? So it's changing the script, changing the internal dialogue, paying attention to your thoughts, which takes attention and intention. So it's saying, I'm going to start paying attention to how I'm thinking. What's that chat that's going on? What am I focusing on, worrying about, overthinking about? How am I looking at my situation and my stressors? Are there different perspectives that I could take? And when you catch these, is to catch them firstly, which is key. And then you look to either neutralize them, so cancel it. If you're knocking yourself down or saying, I'm never going to be able to do this, cancel it, change it to make it more positive, not unrealistically positive, so need to go on the other scale or side of the scale, but just to see if you could shift the language a little bit more positively, or question it. How do I know this to be? And that, by the more you start doing that and repeating that cycle, the more you're going to be changing the habitual way of thinking, and the more then you're going to start approaching how you're dealing with stresses in a slightly different way, which hopefully will be in a more positive and effective way. So there are two quotes just that kind of bring together this point, which is, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And I think this is a really effective one, and it's one I try to live by, which is, it's not to minimize our stresses. It's not to pretend they're not there, in no shape or form, but it's to say, this is in front of me. If I were to look at it differently, if I were to think about it differently, how would that change the situation? And therefore, how would I approach it and experience it differently? And then to add to that is, don't believe everything you think. And I really love this one too, is, just because you think it doesn't make it so. So because we think we'll never get that job, because we think we'll never get promoted, because we think we'll never be able to improve the turbulent relationship we might have with the child, or that we'll never get out of the financial stresses that we're in right now, or whatever it might be. It doesn't make it fact and truth. And even knowing that in itself can help us start thinking about the situation slightly differently, so that we approach it differently and respond differently. And then one final one, I'm conscious of our time, is focusing on the problem. You might miss the easy solution. And I love this one, which is, if we can step back a little bit from our situation to get a different perspective, we can see that maybe we have other options and other solutions to a problem that we might have, which is causing a stressor. And this isn't about judging ourselves in where we might be at in this. It's just really about understanding ourselves, where we're at and how we're thinking, so that then we can move and shift ever so slightly to help us. And one last one is the rocking chair one, with regards to worry, which I think is a big thing that has taken a lot of our minds over this last year, again, of worrying about finances, of worrying about health, worrying about loved ones, worrying about all sorts of things, which is, we do it, but it's not necessarily getting us somewhere. So if we can catch that worry loop we might be in and say, okay, how do I stop this? How can I neutralize it? Or how can I say, okay, what am I going to do about this? So rather than spending the time worrying about it, is to roll our sleeves up, break it down and say, okay, what can I do about this situation that will help me worry less and therefore be less stressed? Last quote is, the greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. Okay. And again, just to reinforce, I'm not about unrealistic positivity or diminishing stresses that we have. It's really more around the power of the thought on this. So I acknowledge, I can see my screen is flicking. I'm not sure if it is for the audience as well, and therefore for the recording. I'm not sure what's happening. So apologies if that's what you're seeing on your screen. So here's a summary slide, and then I'm going to pass back to Lisa, who is going to say a few words as well.
That's great. Thank you so much, Derval. Give me plenty of food for thought on how I can handle stresses in my life a lot better. Just to run through a few of our digital resources that are free to all members. And if you're not a member, that's no problem. You can contact us, and it's so easy to join up online now, and it's free. BorrowBox has a huge selection of ebooks and audiobooks. So you can search for your category. So if you want to search for stress or mindfulness or healthy eating or whatever category you're interested in, you can search that way, and you can find all the books that are available to download onto your device. Press Reader is another amazing resource. So you can read newspapers from pretty much all around the world, and also have access to magazines on the Orbi Digital. So sometimes we mindlessly scroll, and that can cause us stress, or we're reading too many news articles. So if we download a magazine that is on interiors or houses or whatever you're interested in, it can be a nice way to relieve stress and just forget about your worries for a while. And then if you want to challenge yourself a little bit more, there's Transparent Languages and also Universal Class, where you can learn a new skill. And that in itself can maybe help you get out of a rush that you're in. It can help broaden your skills to apply for a new job. Many different opportunities there for you. And as Derval mentioned as well, how getting out there and moving always helps with our mood and deal with stresses. Pop in your earphones and listen to some music from Freegal, which is a free music streaming service, or listen to an audiobook from BorrowBox. So plenty of options there. But again, we're always open online. So we're available by email for any questions that you might have. And I'd like to thank Derval for running this fantastic seminar and series over the last 3 weeks. And also thank you all for joining us. And we will be providing more work matters at the library webinars and events over the coming year. So please do stay tuned for that. So thank you very much, Derval.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you everyone for your time, and it's been a pleasure.